When you think of New Year's Eve, you might think of spending time with your friends, spending time with your family, or even going to a New Year's Eve party. Or maybe you think of being in the Kroger parking lot at 2 a.m. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Snapshot. I'll tell you what, it feels good to be back. Welcome to Snapshot. My name is Sergey Ivanov. You know me. I'm the guy that makes YouTube videos every couple of years. I took too long of a break. I really did. It's been a long time since I've actually done an episode of anything on YouTube, especially Snapshot, and you know what? It feels good to be back. It really does. But alas, I am back and I do have a new video. So you've read the title of this video and you're probably thinking he's gone and lost it. You're probably thinking he's gone and lost it by episode 1. But especially now. So let me tell the story. New Year's Eve. There are celebrations everywhere, hopefully socially distanced. But knowing the intelligence level of the residents of my town, probably not. But the festivities are abundant. There are New Year's Eve parties. Everyone is having a good time. I actually recently got over COVID, as did my two best friends, Jeremiah and Elijah. So knowing that we still had 3 months to get together and to have a good time, we decided to have a small little get together for New Year's Eve. And that is exactly what we did. We did what every good teenager does on New Year's Eve. We had a Star Wars marathon and ate vegetable soup. Listen, it's the time of COVID. You can't be having a big, giant, bombastic party where everyone's hitting the bong or whatever. You can't do that in 2020. I will say this, shout out to Jeremiah and Elijah's mom for making a killer vegetable soup. I mean, I went in for seconds. And then we watched the ball drop very unceremoniously. It was sad. The most audience they had was the giant car sales balloons. I leave my friend's house and I immediately have the instinct, the urge. It's drawn magnetically to our nearby Kroger parking lot. I don't know why. I just was. So I pull in, and the first thing I notice is that it is like a ghost town. Usually you have 2 or 3 cars, it's some level of cars. Maybe it was just New Year's Eve, maybe it was just that night, maybe it was just that it was 2 a.m. and I've never been there at 2 a.m. But it was like a ghost town. For as far as the eye could see, there was maybe 1 car. And so being a photographer, what did I do? I put on the Doobie Brothers and jammed. But after I put on the Doobie Brothers and jammed, I got out of my car and I took out my tripod and my cable release, which more and more these days I'm bringing a lot of my photography gear with me no matter where I go. I got out of the car and basically there were a couple scenes that I pointed the lens at. The way the Kroger in my town is set up is that it's the Kroger and then next to it, sort of like in a strip mall way, there's a couple other smaller stores. There's a consignment store, there's a hardware store, etc, etc. So I basically do what I do every time that I go out for a photo session. I point my camera at some things here, point some camera at my things there. I walk away with a couple of compositions. Now mind you, it is New Year's Eve at night, 2 a.m., and it is about 30 degrees Fahrenheit, which is quite frigid. It's not Ulyanovsk Russia temperature, but it is still pretty cold where you need a jacket or two. Now, I will tell you something right off the bat. Pretty much most of my work is exclusively these days on Vision 3 500T. 500T, the T meaning tungsten film, meaning it is balanced for indoor lights, basically what I have here. What that means is the film itself has a very blue cast. And obviously if you're shooting indoors in warmer tungsten light, that comes in handy to balance out the yellowish orange cast of the indoor light. But when you shoot outdoors, there is not a need for the cast. In fact, if anything, it just makes it very blue. I did something this shoot that I don't normally do, which is I shot unfiltered. Normally, when you shoot Vision 3 500T, you put a filter over your lens if you are shooting outdoors so that the color balance can be the right color balance so you don't get too much blue. I decided not to do that. And in the end, I think it did work out pretty well. So I take some photos of the Kroger, I take some photos of a shopping cart near the Harbor Freight, I take some photos of Long John Silver's. Do not eat there. It is great for photos, but not for eating. And after that, I promptly get in my car and it will not start. Now, I did not film this, but it did happen where if you look in the photos, you will see that I left my car headlights on, and that was a mistake because when I went back into my car to leave, it's about 2 a.m., New Year's Eve, I'm tired, and my car will not start. Very good thinking, Sergey. So I call up Jeremiah and Elijah, and I ask them, hey, can you come here and jumpstart my car? And they're like, okay. I'm thinking they're gonna know what to do. And they pull up in a big giant pickup truck and spend 20 minutes arguing about, do you leave the car on when you jump start it? Do you turn it off and then turn it on? Do you turn it off, unplug it, then turn it? It's not like we can just do trial and error, because if we do trial and error, we'll electrocute ourselves and die. Finally, get the car jump started and I go home. Process the images, and here they are. So a minute ago, I told you about how when I shoot 500T, I always use an 85B warming filter to balance out the tungsten cast. I decided not to do that. And in the end, I think it did work out pretty well. And especially, it kind of caused me to step out of my comfort zone, because if you look at a lot of my work, what I realize is there's not a lot of blue in my photography. A lot of the photos I take are a lot of warmer tones. Red is a big giant motif. Probably every single photo I take has some sort of red in it. This photo has some red in it at the car brake lights. So shooting something that had a lot more cool and bluish tones, that was actually something that I hadn't really done before, and I'm glad I did because I think it works well. I like the composition. Obviously, this is 2:20:1 aspect ratio. I do that all the time, is cropping to movie aspect ratios, basically. And I think obviously you do get some great very punchy contrast from the blue in the sky and the overall blue tungsten sky and background to the very bright, warm interior lights at the Kroger store. Strangely enough, this is a theme in this photo shoot. A lot of these photos remind me of movies, and this is not consciously, and usually it would be consciously, but I'm only realizing this later. Talking about how these photos remind me of movies, I'll tell you what this shot reminds me of. It reminds me of the movie The Thing, the 1982 The Thing. I don't know why, but something about this shot, it feels like it gives off the vibe that you get on like one of the establishing shots outside of the Antarctica camp if you watch the movie The Thing. If you take a little bit of a closer look, you actually will probably be surprised to see there's actually a lot more detail than you might think at first notice. In the right, you see the Coke machines, you see there's a shopping cart on the left and the newspaper stands. If you look really carefully, you can see a couple of the signs on the indoor part of the Kroger. Overall, not too bad. Now this is the Long John Silver's photo that I was telling you about earlier. I'll tell you what, this image is actually not one that I like too much. I just don't like it. There are two problems in my mind with this photo. One, it is very heavy on the right side of the frame. If you look at the image, most of the light is on the right side of the frame. A lot of the interesting elements of the frame are on the right side of the frame. What that does is it leaves the left side of the frame basically dark, uninteresting, very bland and flat. You don't want that. Problem number two is that I think the subject, which is the Long John Silver's restaurant itself, and especially the signage on there, the neon signs of the Long John Silver's, that is a little too minute, small in relative to the whole composition for it to basically stand out and do its job in this image. Now, the other thing that I want to mention, which is very interesting, is if you look at the video, you can see that the street light is very, very bright, insane, piercing blue. But you look at the photo and it's almost not there. One of the biggest reasons why I wanted to take this photo is because of that blue light that is coming in from that street lamp. So all that I can really surmise is maybe that frequency of light on the UV spectrum is just not able to be rendered by Vision 3 film. That's really the only explanation that I can come up with, because when you look at the film, it is basically that blue light is not even there. Now, I will say it's not all bad, because there are some things I do like. For example, there are some nice lens flares from the lights. The lights create a very interesting element to the image, and that's actually something that I don't mind. I'm actually a pretty big fan of lens flares. The only time when I don't like them, and we'll see that in a minute, is when they basically cover up things that I want to be visible. This image, not good. Now, this one is sort of a variant of the one that I took earlier. Strangely enough, I didn't want to crop this down because I think this actually just works the way it is, just because I think you crop it and it would be a little too tight. And again, strangely enough, I don't know where I got this, but I look at the light, and it reminds me of like a UFO coming down. I don't know why, but that was my first thought when I looked at the contact sheet and I looked at this image. But this basically has a lot of the elements that the earlier composition has. It has the horizontality, it has the light, it has my car. And it has basically all those elements that I was looking for in this photo shoot, and at least with this scene. Now, this one is actually the final image that I took, and this one is actually probably the one that I was most excited about. Now, I'll tell you the main point of the photo, and you might actually miss the main point of the photo. Zoom in real close, and then boom, you see the shopping cart. Basically, the whole point of why I wanted to take this photo is for the shopping cart and the distance. And I remember, I don't know why, but when I was taking the photo, my first thought was, oh, this will be like an Alex Soth image. I kept thinking that in my head, this will be like Alex Soth. This is an Alex Soth type of image. And so I got home and I actually tried to look up for this exact video what Alex Soth image I was thinking of, and I looked it up. There is no such Alex Soth image. I have looked very extensively, and Alex Soth does not have an image of a shopping cart in a parking lot of a store. That doesn't exist. So I don't know where I got that idea from, but that was what was going through my mind. But if you do look at the image, this one has something that a motif of my photography is a very pinpoint, specific one bright instance of bright color, at least color that contrasts from the background. And that you get with the Harbor Freight sign, and you get a little bit of a reflection of that in the puddles on this pavement. And on the edges, you've got the light poles, adding a lot of contrast and a lot of juicy lens flare. They add some light, obviously, on the reflections on the pavement. That obviously adds a lot of depth and interest to the image. And again, if you look in the very background, you see details that, like, I'm glad they were there because they add a lot of interest to this image. You look in the very background, you can see a bunch of lights lighting up housing. You can see, if you look very carefully, you can see a bunch of trees, which I didn't think were going to be visible when I took the photo. I thought that would just be all black. There is one thing that I don't like about this image. I don't like it at all. Look on the right. There's a big, giant lens flare. I know a little bit ago I talked about how I actually like lens flare, and that is true. This lens flare is a problem, and I'll tell you why. This lens flare is just distracting because A, it's a weird trapezoid shape. It's just weird. It also causes some weird issues of covering up part of the frame, which is the consignment store sign. And overall, it also takes attention away because you have the light poles providing light, you have the Harbor Freight sign providing light, and those are basically supposed to be the only 3 instances of pinpoint bright lights lighting the scene. And then you look over on the very, very right corner, and then you have a big giant lens flare that's way brighter than everything else, and it causes a lot of problems, which sucks. But overall, I don't think it ruins the image. I think it's still a good image. Now, granted, this would be an image that you definitely have to print very big, or at least zoom in a lot to see basically the main point, which is the shopping cart. Case in point, I'm probably not going to be posting this to Instagram where people will be seeing this image in a way that is the size of a post-it note. But overall, I think this was a good time. It was fun to especially go out, because I don't do night photography basically ever, so this was a good way to get out of my comfort zone, to experiment with a lot of things that I haven't tried before, and I think overall, at the very least, it gave me some experience, and it was a good time, and I got some good photos out of it. So anyway, thank you so much for watching this episode of Snapshot. I definitely need to not take 5-month breaks between each video. I definitely need to do this more often. But thank you so much for watching. Make sure to follow me on Instagram at Servanov, SERVANOV. And also be sure to follow me on Instagram at Sergey_speaks. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Thank you so much. It means so much that you care. Thank you so much. And I will see you next time. Notice how I didn't say next week, because it probably will not be next week. Knowing me, it will probably be 50 years. I'll have gray hair.